Today we're going to be making this super cute and creative interactive card with lots of moving parts. For my birthday, my sister actually made me a very similar card and I was very touched, so I wanted to make one for her as well. So let's get started. You will need a paper bag, an X-Acto knife, a pen or pencil, a ruler, a cutting mat, double-sided tape, needle and thread, stickers, recycled paper, etc. With our recycled bag, I just have this one from Olive Young. We're gonna break it apart, so I'm just ripping off any parts that were glued together because I think that will maximize the surface area I can get from this recycled bag. And of course, you don't have to use a recycled bag, you can use any paper that you have. Here, with the bag all laid out, I'm figuring out what I want the width and the length of my card to be. And so I'm figuring that I can harvest basically the two widest sides of the bag. So just folding along the existing crease, running my knife along there so that I can get a flat panel like so. When I'm done dissecting the bag, you'll basically have 4 panels. 2 wider panels and 2 skinnier panels. I'm only going to be working with the 2 wider panels, and because the 2 wider panels have handles attached, I'm just folding along where the handle ends basically to cut it off so that I can have a completely flat piece of paper to start making the card with. So I just folded that panel in half, and I'm taking my ruler and cutting off any scraggly edges so that it'll be perfectly aligned. And then I am aligning it on my mat again and cutting off any bumpy parts on the other side so that I can have the beginnings of my book. And you just want to repeat this again for the other bag panel. And I'm also cutting off the end because sometimes when I folded it over, it wasn't exactly perfect, and I just want everything to be aligned. Now you should have 2 of these pamphlet looking things, and you're going to tuck one inside of the other. And it's your choice whether you want, the print of the bag versus the inside of the bag on which face. I ended up switching it up a little bit from this, but honestly, it shouldn't really matter because you're probably going to be covering all the surfaces anyway with other paper. Once they're tucked inside of each other, you might also want to cut off the edge because we did make them identical, so when it's tucked into each other, the size is going to be a little bit off. Now is your time to also adjust any dimensions as necessary. I decided that I thought it was a little too long, so I made it slightly shorter in the width department, but really just do what feels comfortable to you in a kind of handheld book size. Now we're going to sew our 2 panels together. I'm taking a ruler and I'm marking the center, and then I'm marking 1.5 to 2 centimeters away from here on either side. Using those pen markings we just created, we're going to poke holes with a needle first, and then we're going to take needle and thread and sew through it fully. And I'm just going to link a tutorial in the information box in the corner so that you can better see how it's done, because honestly, my work is very shaky in this position. When you're done with the stitching, you should have something like this, and I chose to use white thread because, as you can see, it's not that noticeable against the brown paper. And despite all of our careful resizing from earlier, you might still need to resize again, so you can take the time to do that now before you start decorating. The first step of the decorating process was writing "Happy Birthday, Corey," or "Happy birthday, whoever you're wishing." And so I just took a permanent marker and some leftover cardstock, and I'm drawing bubble letters, just doing HAPPY, etc., etc. And once you do all that, you'll cut out with an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. Here are all the necessary letters, and I'm just cutting it out with an X-Acto knife. This is a time-consuming process, but as with all things, it is a labor of love. As you can see, I cut with a remaining white border around the black letter, but you can cut to your preference. Next, I'm taking some washi tape that is pretty wide. This is about maybe 1 inch wide, and I'm covering all of the seams. So covering the back seam and also the side edges. I just thought that this provided a nice frame, but it's also not necessary. After I'm done taping with the washi tape, I have this rectangle of slightly lighter brown paper, but you're welcome to use any sort of pattern or color, and I'm going to cover one side of it with double-sided tape. And this is going to be the panel that we're going to stick onto the front before we stick all of the letters. After you're done organizing your letters onto the space and you're happy with the arrangement, you can glue it on with a glue stick or double-sided tape, or I really like using this double-sided tape dispenser whose format is kind of like whiteout. With the front cover done, this is what you should have. Front cover with the letters, and then first spread, second spread, third spread. Our next step is actually we're going to work on the third spread, which is going to be the last spread that you saw. And this project has a lot of paper layers, so I like to smush it in between a bunch of books when I'm not actively working on it. For this third spread, I printed out a bunch of pictures at different sizes, and I'm going to collage all of it onto the final third spread. So of course, first things first, you're going to want to cut everything out, and I made sure to have a good balance of pictures I wanted to have the background in, because those can be the first images that we lay down and they'll be helpful in covering the brown of the paper bag. And then there are other smaller images where, like that circle that you see where I'm just going to cut out the circle, or images where I only want to cut out the figure. So this is a very free process, so about 2 pages of pictures will honestly be more than enough. With all of our images cut out, I'm just laying out what I think would be a good arrangement. And like I said before, big pictures can go in the background and cover some of the patterning if you have patterning in your brown bag. And I first laid out a layer of double-sided tape so that everything would be sticky. But honestly, I don't know if I'll do this again, because if you make a mistake and want to go back, it's a little bit difficult to peel everything off again. So I recommend putting adhesive on each image individually first. Just making sure that you kind of plan what negative space you want to fill with smaller images is really important for this step, depending on how crowded you want your collage to be. Towards the end, if you have any excess hanging off, you can just trim that, and let's move on to the next step. Now we're working on the second spread of our book, and because my second spread has this Olive Young branding on it, I'm covering it with brown paper, same light brown paper that you saw from before, and same process, right? Double-sided tape, sizing to fit, and you get it. So we're gonna speed past this. With our second spread covered in the light brown paper, we're going to start working on the calendar element of this project. First of all, we're going to take any paper. I recommend a slightly thicker paper that is not as thick as watercolor, but can hold up structurally. And on this paper, we're going to be writing out a calendar. So this is February. So I'm just looking at the calendar for 2025 and writing out all of the dates. I'm also being careful of the dimensions of my card and making sure that the width of Sunday to Saturday does not extend past the width of my actual card. And then when you're done, you can cut out your calendar. I chose to also highlight the date of my sister's birthday, so 15 is bolder in this. The next element of this calendar portion will be a background, and I'm going to use this Paris baguette bag, but you can use any contrasting color. I'm taking the dimensions of my calendar and I'm budgeting space for a border around about 1 centimeter thick, but on the top budgeting about 3 centimeters so that I can write February. And you'll see how that works out in a second. I'm using a scrap piece of paper to budget how much space I'll need for the capital letters of February. Based on my estimate with the capital letters February, I'm able to cut a width and compare it to the size of my card. Here, I'm happy with the length and width of the blue rectangle and also how the white rectangle fits into it, which is the calendar part. So once I was happy with these dimensions, I decided to round the corners. And my cutting mat has various concentric circles, etc., so that you can cut different edges, so you don't need any corner rounders or anything to achieve this. You just need an X-Acto knife. And for the capital letters for February, I'm doing the same method as before with the happy birthday, where I am outlining bubble letters and then filling them in. And I'm using this kind of bluish purplish ink, and you can decide what colors match with your theme the best. And again, like before, I'm leaving a white border just so that it can pop out against the dark blue. Before we glue anything on, we're gonna work on the sliding mechanism for the calendar. So I'm taking a straight edge and I'm cutting a super thin line from one corner of the calendar to my goal date, which in this case is the 15th. And depending on if your birthday is near the beginning or the end of the month, you can adjust your line or diagonal accordingly. For the sliding mechanism, I made a different mock-up to show you up close that's much larger. You're gonna wanna fold a strip of paper like so. I try to illustrate this as clear as I can in this demo, but if you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments down below. And then you can slot the white slip of paper into the sliding mechanism with the two free ends as the back and the flat end as the front, like so. Here is the front where you'll stick your sticker on, and that'll be sort of your handle, and then the back should look like this. Back to the real object. We've stuck our sticker onto that front side of our sliding mechanism, and we can start gluing things together. In order for this thing to continue sliding after you glue, make sure you only tape the edges of your calendar. So as you can see, I am only putting this double-sided tape on the very edges, and the inside really is staying hollow and free so that we can continue sliding. If everything went accordingly, this is what you should have now, and now we can start gluing our letters. I like to start from the central letters and then go towards the ends, so that way I know I'm leaving enough room on either side. I decided to put the calendar aspect on the bottom half of this spread, and then I have this really great picture of my sister saluting at the camera, and I decided to grab that from the collage because I didn't use all of those photos anyways and stick it on the top. So now I can fully attach this blue calendar aspect to the bottom, and then I will decorate the top with my sister's picture with stickers and other cutouts. I wanted to include a little message that I could handwrite, so that's why I'm leaving that square of white paper, and then as you can see in just a bit, I'm gonna outline it with the dark blue using a similar method as the calendar, so things can tie together thematically, and I also have some freedom in what I want to personally write on the card. And this is the design that I ultimately come up with. Next, we're gonna work on our third spread, and I'm harvesting some cardstock that came with stickers. You can again use anything that you would like, but this happened to work out very well. The dimensions fit perfectly, so I'm just cutting to size. Next, I figured that these two pieces of horizontal cardstock stacked on top of each other worked quite well for the upper panel, so I decided to do that. But there's a little bit of writing and other extraneous things, and we're gonna figure that out in a second because I didn't want that to become like an accidental focus of the card. On this upper panel with the two horizontal cardstock pieces, we are going to put our sliding photo mechanism. I'm printing out 2 photos from my Polaroid printer, but if you don't have this, obviously this is kind of a rare tool. You can definitely use other photos and cut them down to size to fit your card dimensions. I am harvesting another piece of cardstock from another sticker pack, and it matches the theme quite nicely, so I'm going with it. And I'm figuring out the exact dimensions of the Polaroid rectangle, and I'm gonna cut out a frame. Something that I found useful is using scrap paper and matching up dimensions correctly because I'm working with limited materials here, so I want to make sure I get it right. After marking out the 4 corners and making sure that I was happy with the dimensions, I cut out the center like so. Now you should have a empty rectangle like so, and this will fit perfectly around your Polaroid picture or whatever picture you decide to print. And when making this frame, you want to budget more room than the actual size of the entire Polaroid because now you need to put some glue down. So I'm double side taping 3 edges of this frame so that on the fourth edge, the Polaroid picture can actually slide out. Something that I recommend is actually having the two Polaroids inside before you stick your frame on so that there's enough wiggle room, because the width of paper is not non-negligible. But if you decide to slide it in afterwards, like is shown in this video, you might experience a little bit more bulging than you'd like. As I mentioned before, there's some writing that is on the cardstock, and something I love is more stickers. So I think the stickers in this case add to the theme, but they also help obscure some of the printing and the seam between the two different cardstocks. And to tie everything together, don't be afraid to also add flowers around the outside of the frame. Underneath the sliding photo mechanism, I'm adding the letter portion. This is a pretty simple accordion fold. I'm folding upwards and then about 1 inch to 1.5 inches downwards. I covered this flat side with double-sided tape, and this is how it will open. Once everything is glued down, I'm going to take some white paper and cut a little handle that I will attach underneath this half flap right there. You can decide the dimensions of this white panel, and it's quite flexible because you can also just hide it underneath how much ever space you have under that brown flap. I took a piece of double-sided tape and attached the handle to the brown letter portion. And believe it or not, you are done. This entire card took many hours, and it is definitely a labor of love. So I'm so grateful to my sister who made me one originally, and I hope you guys also are able to make one like this for your loved ones, or even for yourself if you just want a nice creative challenge. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.